Okay, thanks so much for joining us, everybody. My name is Tom. I'm an educator here at Cheehaw Park and Zoo, and we have a teacher workshop today that I'm really excited to be talking about. It's about a topic that's um, very near to me. I love it a lot. It's actually what inspired me to get into environmental education a little bit because of a certain program I was involved with, and I'll talk about that a little bit as well. But today I'm going to be talking about citizen science, and we're going to go over what citizen science is, what the benefits of it are, and that's going to be primarily the focus is really why citizen science is so important, a couple of the challenges of it and how we can overcome those challenges, and then we'll talk about some citizen science programs I was involved with as a way to demonstrate how important it can be and how benefits can really spur from citizen science, and then some other programs that are a little bit more local to Georgia. So with that being said, I'm just going to start off with what citizen science is, which is really any form of science in which the general public can participate in helping with monitoring or data collection. And what's really key is that they work hand in hand with scientists or other professionals in the field in which they are engaged with. And so this is really cool because citizen science can vary widely in terms of intensity or even focus. And so this can range anything from small kids helping to collect information all the way up to specifically designed programs that are designed with citizen science in mind, and that are developed so that the general public can become engaged and help reach the goals of whatever the project is. And so what I think is really cool too is that citizen science doesn't necessarily have to be designed by the researchers or the scientists and then targeting the general audience. It can be private groups that have an idea or an interest, and then they reach out to researchers or any kind of organization and say, hey, we have this cool idea. Is there any way that we can put this into action? And then, citizen science can be created through that, which is really cool as well. And so again, it can range from anything from school children helping out with projects to somewhat more professionals who have gear who want to participate, to even just like anybody in the general public. So one of the things we're going to talk about is how technology is helping to help advance citizen science a little bit so that anybody of any age can become involved. And so there's lots of really cool ways that citizen science can come about. Okay, so I wanted to go over what some of the key benefits to citizen science are. And one of those is that much more data can be collected than otherwise would be able to get collected if citizen scientists were not involved. So what that means is that, there's only so many researchers available or people on a research crew that can be collecting data. And so when you open it up to the general public and are willing to take on citizen scientists, you can expand the amount of area you're covering physically, geographically. You can have more study sites, which increases replication, which is really important for science, and being able to do some monitoring. You can increase the frequency of which data is collected, so you can just have more data points coming in overall, and you can really boost how much information is collected when you open it up to the general public, which is really exciting. Another huge benefit is you can save a lot of money with citizen science. So oftentimes when citizen scientists agree to participate in whatever the project is, they are doing it out of interest and they are volunteering their time, meaning less people have to actually be hired to collect this information, or anytime someone volunteers, they don't need to be paid at all. So that is information that's going to be coming in that does not require any out-of-pocket costs to pay someone to actually go out and do that work. and that comes back to how much information can be collected, right? If you can have people who are volunteering and all of that information that's coming in is free, why limit how many people can participate in those projects? And so that is a huge perk, is that not only are you increasing how much information you can collect through monitoring or actual data collection, but it's not at cost to the project, which is huge. And the last one that's really interesting, and why and kind of comes back to why I'm even talking about this as a teacher workshop, especially considering that I'm in an education department, is because one of the huge benefits of citizen science, or that we hope it is anyway, is that it can increase awareness about whatever the project is. So the hope is that people talk and that they don't just go out and help collect that information, which even if they are, that's still a huge benefit in itself. But what we really hope is that people are going to participate in whatever project they got involved with, and then they go and they talk about it, which is not unlikely, because if they're doing this to begin with, that means they're interested in it, and they're excited about it and they care. And so there's also a good chance that if it's something they care about to begin with, it's something they're going to be interested in sharing with family and friends. And hopefully, maybe there's even potential that can lead to recruiting additional people to come participate in these projects, which can lead to, hopefully like a little bit of a feedback in terms of increasing both awareness and participation in citizen science projects. So really cool. And so I wanted to go over kind of some different topics that can help demonstrate really what these benefits are. And so the first one I want to talk about is this organization called Earthwatch Institute, which is primarily a citizen science-based program or initiative where they have locations all over the world. And so I got fortunate enough to work with a citizen science program through Earthwatch, kind of on accident, but it really helped teach me about environmental education and citizen science. And so they have different themes and projects designed based on the location at which they are found. And so the location I worked at was in Churchill, Manitoba, which is on the southwestern edge of Hudson Bay. And it's located at a really cool spot where they are doing a lot of research on climate change. And so their theme that they call it is climate change at the Arctic's edge. And so what we do at that location is we take on citizen science teams, and they come to that location and they participate in research. They get hands-on experience with helping collect data. And the key thing about that location is it's a long-term monitoring site, which means that information that they help collect is going to contribute to a long-term data set. And what's really key about that is that we can monitor trends or changes over a long period of time, specifically related to climate change. And so this really helps demonstrate some of the benefits. So we have people coming in that are volunteering their time, so we can increase how many data points we have for this long-term monitoring over many summers. I believe they have over 8 years worth of data now. And then cost, so there's relatively little cost. And in fact, some of these Earthwatch teams actually have to pay to come to these locations. And so not only is it little cost to the research team or the project, but it can also help boost education within that science center. So they can actually make a little bit of money and help support that science center so that they can have this ongoing project, which is really important, especially when you're at locations such as a remote science center. So that's really cool too. So not only is it low cost, but it can actually be beneficial for conservation and helping to actually keep that program running. And then what's really key, and what's really I wanted to talk about too, some of the disadvantages or challenges of citizen science, and that is quality control of data, right? So when you think about bringing on the general public in terms of helping with your research, there's going to be some concern, or at least there has to be some acknowledgement of the fact that anybody can come help do this. And so you have to be aware that there needs to be at least a little bit of quality control happening to make sure that the information you are collecting is on par with what is acceptable for using for actual research. And so the biggest way to overcome that challenge is to have really easy and really well thought out protocols. And then not only do you need to have really easy and really thought out protocols, but you have to have someone who is comfortable with training people prior to them going out and actually helping to collect the information. Now, this is a little bit more relevant for citizen science when it's designed for a certain purpose or at a specific location, or a little bit more of, a planned out project. So some of the citizen science that we're going to talk about a little bit later on isn't necessarily, a specific planned project specific to one location or research question. And then training is impossible because if it's open to anybody in the general public, one-on-one training isn't going to be possible. But anyway, at this location, one of the ways to help ensure that, the data that's collected is at least collected in the same manner, summer after summer and trip after trip is done in a consistent way, is to have a really clear and easy to follow protocol. And so that's exactly what we do in Churchill. We have teams of citizen scientists that come in from all over the world to come to this remote subarctic science center. We train them on the same protocol. So every single team that comes in, we have about 4 to 5 teams that come in every summer for 8 summers, and they all do the exact same thing, which means we are getting, data points on wetlands for 4 to 5 times a summer for 8 summers. And so you can see how that's really a long-term data set. But to do that, they all have to be trained in the exact same way. And so what we do is we go out and we show these teams how to use each tool. They do a lot of different things. So the whole goal behind this science center and their project, to give a little bit of context, is we are monitoring how the physical characteristics, the chemical characteristics, the biodiversity, and other aspects of really shallow wetlands in the subarctic are changing over time with climate change. So they go out and they do everything from measure the temperature of the water, the pH, they seine the wetlands to get an idea of the diversity that's in the wetlands each summer. And with all of those different characteristics that are collected, they can monitor changes in all of those over the years. They even document vegetation or the shape of the wetlands to see if shape is even changing, depth, everything you can imagine. But again, the key thing there is that everybody needs to be trained consistently. But now they are able to actually take this information, and I believe soon they are going to hopefully have someone who's going to actually analyze all of the information that's been collected over the years and try to see if there are any noticeable trends that are occurring out in the subarctic. And so this is a lot of information that could be collected, but probably way less often at the Science Center. So they could maybe get a round or 2 in each summer, but to really have as much information as they need for it to be successful, it relies on citizen scientists coming to that location. So really cool. And then I wanted to talk about an example that's really important to me, that I really care about, and that's because I conducted my master's research up at the subarctic, and I actually had these Earthwatch teams help me out with my research. And so when I was talking about one of those benefits is that a lot more information can be collected. In my case, the information that was collected wouldn't even be possible without the Earthwatch citizen scientists. So not only can it increase information, it can actually make entire projects possible that otherwise wouldn't be if you didn't have the numbers necessary to do so. And so what I was looking at is how climate change is impacting the physiology or the body conditions of wood frogs in the subarctic. And so what I needed to do is I needed to make comparisons of wood frogs in 3 different habitat types in the subarctic. And so the study center is at kind of a cool location where the tree line is actually shifting kind of close to where the study center is located. So we're having a shift from the forest to the tundra where it's a bit colder. And it's a really unique location in that transition from one of those major habitat types to the other is occurring pretty close to the science center. And so we were able to, with the help of research or citizen scientists, make direct comparisons between the three different habitat types, the forest, the tundra, and the transition zone between the two. But what was important is that since we were looking at conditions that affect a frog at a very specific location, we couldn't monitor conditions in each of the habitat types at different times. We had to know how those conditions compared under the exact same weather conditions, or else we wouldn't be able to conclusively say this is what was happening in the forest, this is what was happening in the tundra, because they could have just altered depending on weather. So with the help of citizen scientists, we were able to have teams measuring weather conditions and environmental conditions at each of the three habitat types at the exact same time. And that's not something that we would have had the literal manpower or numbers to be able to do unless I had the help from the citizen scientists. So really cool example of how they can make some science possible that otherwise isn't even possible if they're not helping. And what was really special is that since it was my master's program and this has never been tried before, this was a new research project, the citizen scientists actually got to even be engaged a little bit in the feedback and development of the methodology that was working. So with my very first team, we came back and we just had a group meeting and we talked about what worked, what didn't work. They knew what my goals and objectives were, but then we came back and we brainstormed after our very first run, and they told me what they thought would be helpful for them being able to deploy in a more comfortable way to study their conditions or their metrics that they had to study. And then we tried to implement them, and we came up with a new methodology for how they could help out while still reaching the exact same goals. And sure enough, by the time we did our second run, we were able to actually complete the run and measure everything that we needed to measure. And so it was just a really exciting and cool way to show how citizen science can help advance research. And so same with the big groups monitoring the wetlands. I taught all my groups how to, use the tools we were using. We did a full day of training and practicing with the equipment and just Q&A, and them asking me anything they needed to ask me before we even went out. Made sure everybody was comfortable with all the equipment and everything that needed to be done. And so that was really cool too, just being able to answer questions and even explain. So this is a big learning opportunity. And that comes back to the third benefit, which is that this is an educational opportunity as well. So while these citizen scientists come to these Earthwatch locations, one of which just happened to be the subarctic site, while about half the time they're there is these teams helping actually collect data and information, the other half is we provide educational opportunities to these people as well. So at least once or twice a day, we do a presentation for them. I always liked to give a talk about my research to at least so that they're not just helping collect the data, but they're also understanding why I'm even doing this research, what my objectives were, what we were hoping to learn from this research. And so I kind of gave them a mini talk about the importance of the research. And we tried to do that with everything we did. So at this specific location, they received climate change talks to put their entire experience into context. They would receive cool talks about the Northern Lights and the science behind the Northern Lights and polar bear ecology. So this was very much so an educational opportunity for all these citizen scientists as much as it was for them to actually help collect data. And it's not necessarily that them helping collect data is bad. They come because they want to. They want to be engaged and take part in data collection for something that they know is going to make a difference at some point. And that all leads back to one of the biggest outcomes that we hope comes from these Earthwatch experiences that these people have, is that we hope they come and they have the absolute best time while they're with us in the Science Center. It's a pretty wild experience, them being out in the subarctic and even possibly having the opportunity to see polar bears and stuff, which doesn't hurt their experience by any means. And so we just hope that they are going to go back and they're going to share everything they learned and even just tell cool stories and get more people excited. And hopefully at least them telling cool stories is going to lead to them explaining what they did for research and what the trends they learned were in climate change and things like that. And you know, that's education, that's secondhand education, and hopefully providing a lot of awareness to a lot of people that otherwise might not have seen it, just through people going back and talking. So really cool. That's what we really hope happens. And then if that's the case, then we're reaching many more people than just you know, the 12 people or however many people are in each team throughout the summer. We're hoping they all go back and tell all of their friends and family, and that's really providing a lot of education and outreach through the people who actually participate, especially when it's at a cool location like that and there's a little bit of incentive to go back and learn. So those are both examples of ways that research itself can be benefited, and those are examples of a little bit more of specifically designed programs that are, you know, targeting research or citizen scientists and having people come and participate for specific programs. But then another example I wanted to provide is something that's a little, you know, less formal and has different direct benefits of the program. And so I actually talked about this in my last teacher workshop a little bit, but there's these really important wetland types that are actually very similar to the wetlands up in Churchill that I was just talking about, because they're very shallow wetlands that don't have many fish. So, you know, these frogs are able to be in these wetlands, but there's also wetlands in Maine, well, not just in Maine, but that's where this program takes place, but throughout, that are temporary wetlands called vernal pools, or they can just be referred to as ephemeral wetlands, which means they dry up for part of the year. So they don't hold water, they don't have any permanent inlets or outlets, and they're pretty threatened because they are temporary. And so there's some, you know, increased possibility of them being developed over if during the time period when they don't have water, because some people may not even realize that these wetlands exist. But because they're temporary and because they don't have permanent predators present in them like fish, a lot of animals can use them as important habitat types or as important habitat. So a lot of amphibians and other endangered and threatened species will use these wetlands because they are specialized in, you know, laying eggs in these wetlands and having their eggs and larval stages develop fast enough to get out of the water before it dries up, and without having the threat of fish that's just going to eat them all. And so, but again, because they're only temporary, they can be relatively overlooked. And so there's a citizens science program in Maine where this one's kind of in between, right? So we can still train people, or people can still be trained to go out and evaluate these wetlands and do kind of the initial evaluation. So, you know, there's not enough scientists, or maybe there is, but it's, you know, it's a lot more cost effective to have volunteers go out and do the initial assessments. So they can be given, you know, a vernal pool map, and they can be provided with potential locations. So locations that scientists may think there may be a wetland at, maybe there's not, but it's a fun and cool way to have people help out with science, where they can be trained on the characteristics to look for to identify if it's potentially a vernal pool. If there is water there, then they are trained on how to do what we call egg mass counts. So one of the criteria for eventually actually protecting these wetlands is if there is a certain abundance or number of egg masses within the wetlands. So people are trained on the identification of the different animals' egg masses, how to count them, where to look for them. They're provided sheets for where to record all their information. And then they can bring back all of this information that they collect and provide it to researchers or scientists. And if there's enough evidence to show that, hey, this thing may be protected, then those are the wetlands that are going to go out and get evaluated much more seriously. But you can just imagine if you have citizen scientists who are volunteering their time, again, it doesn't cost money, and and they can go out and assess all these different locations because they're interested in helping out and, you know, getting their feet wet and learning about these wetlands, then I can save a lot of money, a lot of time, and it can just help protect a lot of wetlands. A lot more wetlands can get evaluated and potentially protected just because people are going out and willing to do those initial assessments, which is super cool. And so, you know, we talk about quality control again, right? You know, there needs to be some way to make sure that, you know, people are going out and bringing back at least somewhat reliable information. So one of the ways that we do quality control checks for this kind of research is I believe they ask people to take pictures and bring pictures back. So just off the bat, we can tell if they have actually identified egg masses, and that can be a really fast and easy way just to say, okay, yes, this person did find egg masses. This is worth going and checking out. And so, you know, that's a cool way to do a little bit of quality control with that and really help save researchers and ecologists time. And so, you know, those projects I talked about earlier are more long-term monitoring. My research was actually really quick comparisons. That's a little bit different in terms of research. Now, this is contributing to direct conservation. So if these people are able to go out and find a wetland and bring back enough evidence to suggest that it should be really checked out, and then it goes and gets evaluated by a professional, it can go all the way up to state protection, where then, you know, regulations are set on how much development can occur around these wetlands. It prevents the wetlands themselves from being developed over, filled in, or anything like that. And so it's a really, really cool program that helps protect these wetlands directly. So it's a really cool idea of citizen science. And so that's another example that I had a little bit of experience with. I worked in vernal pools quite a bit, and especially with the amphibians that are used as indicator species, or the species that are actually used to justify protecting those wetlands. And they're important for a number of other reasons. Like I said, other animals use them. Those wetlands are important stopover points for other animals. And the amphibians that breed in these wetlands, you know, there's a huge amount of biomass that comes out of these wetlands that is also being protected when we protect the wetlands themselves. And then when the wetland is protected, a certain amount of terrestrial forest cover is protected around those wetlands. So not only is wetland habitat being protected then, but so is forest habitat. So it can have a pretty big impact in areas where these regulations are set in place. And then some other topics that are a little bit more related to Georgia and citizen science that can happen in Georgia is this program known as Adopt a Stream. And so this is something that I recently got involved with, and I'm very excited to be involved with because I love citizen science. I think it's fantastic. And this is this idea that people can get trained. So now I'm kind of on the receiving aspect of the citizen science, right? I was recently trained on how to go out and evaluate and monitor the physical and the chemical and the biological health of streams throughout Georgia. So kind of how I was talking about, one of the benefits I talked about earlier is that not only can more information be collected, but larger geographic areas can be collected. So with this kind of program, right, everybody picks a location. So eventually I'll pick a stream location or any kind of wetland location that will be my monitoring site. And we'll go out and we'll continuously measure the same characteristics. And that's a way to monitor over time the health of whatever wetland site I choose. And that can be used for a number of things. So for example, if I notice any changes in the regular information that I collect, and that can be an indication that, you know, for some reason something's happened that has altered the chemistry or the physical characteristics or the biological characteristics of that wetland. And that can be a way to, you know, push that information further up the chain and say, hey, maybe we need to check out this site. Something may have changed that requires a little bit of attention. Can be a good way to find like point source pollution or anything like that. But overall, it's a way, and it can also just contribute to long-term data of wetlands within the state. And so obviously I'm volunteering, so they're, I'm not getting paid to do this. I'm doing it because I'm interested and I want to contribute. And then the more people like me who do this, we have more monitoring sites throughout Georgia that we can use to monitor the health of our streams and other wetlands. So really cool. And then another big advantage, right, is that people are welcome to come out and check out these monitoring sites and see what it's all about. And so that can be a way to reach other people and spread information about wetland characteristics and why we monitor these streams and what the benefits are. So, some of their goals is to create awareness, and they also provide, the tools necessary to go out and do this monitoring. So while they still have to provide the information, right, it's still cheaper to send out citizen scientist volunteers rather than having to pay however many people to go out to all these sites that are monitored. And it's really cool. You can see all the different locations that are getting monitored over time. And you can even look at a map and say, okay, there's spots already being done there. Like I'm going to go over here because there's not much information being collected there yet. And then hopefully, people who are doing these site monitoring protocols will share information again and spread awareness of what that program is all about. And so, yeah, it's really cool. It'd be nice to have people come out and check it out. And then there's one other one, which is going even a bit more broad. So that's still, that one's a little bit more Georgia focused and a little bit more local, which is nice to provide that example. But even that one is still right. There was, a mission, and I still got trained. So that one's still even a little bit more specific in terms of, there's certain protocols that need to be found, trainings need to be met. That comes back to quality control. They do something cool for quality control, even with this program where we take water samples. Every time we take a water sample to check for things like E. coli, we have to have an actual control sample to make sure that there's no contamination. So as long as our control sample comes back clean, right, then we can say, okay, we know our samples weren't contaminated for this run. And then what we have in our actual stream or wetland water portions that we brought back are reliable, and we can actually assess those for whatever contents we find. So that's just another way, right, of doing quality control, which I mentioned was a really important part of citizen science. We have to have some way of maintaining quality and reliability of the information we're bringing back. And so I thought that was a cool example of well as quality control. But again, like I was saying, even this program is still a little bit structured and doesn't provide an example of mass general public participation in citizen science. And so the last example I really want to talk about is there's this program, and there's actually a lot of them popping up now. So I know there's some amphibian monitoring sites where if anybody hears, let's say, wood frogs calling or chorusing in the spring, they can drop a pin on a map. And so that's, anybody can go in and do that, right? And provide information. And that's still citizen participation in everyday science and observation. And so a lot of citizen science is just, monitoring and sharing information. And it's still, going to be checked, by someone who's running that program. And so one of the really famous ones is eBird. And so eBird is, like an online program where people can take pictures. And so I know with some of these programs too, the reliability of the documentation is ranked based on what kind of information can be provided. So if people just say they saw this bird here, but they have no other information to back it up, such as photo proof, then it's going to be ranked low in terms of reliability, but the record will still be kept. And then if people can get all the way up to picture identification, then it can be documented as like a stage 3 confirmation record of that bird. And so programs like that are super cool because anybody can, snap a picture of a bird and drop it in. And that can be really useful for monitoring trends in animal geographic location or abundance within an area. That information is kept public. And so it can even be used for research and monitoring and trends. And I believe they even ask that if anybody uses their data for any kind of research, that they just shoot eBird an email and say like, hey, we found this information really useful and we used it, and this is how we used it. And so the idea is that it being general public information can promote research and conservation, and especially in being able to monitor more large scale trends, such as what's the diversity, how many different types of birds are here, or just if we're focusing on one bird species, like what's its complete geographic range, where it can be found. Can also be nice just for getting people excited about wildlife. So I know a lot of people who like to go out and do birding just as a recreational activity, and so they will use programs like this to figure out sites where they can actually go see a specific species and check it off their list, and those are what we call lifers. So if you can go see a bird species you've never seen before, you're checking another one off your list. But we encourage that as well, right? Like we'd like people to be outside and interested in wildlife, because that promotes interest and concern for ecological populations, and that's all really beneficial as well. So that one's an example of something that is way more applicable to the general public and something that anybody can do and participate in. Or even go look at the other information that's already on there. You don't even necessarily have to contribute to it. You can just go online, and if you're interested in looking into a certain species or figuring out where they're found or where the closest location to you that you can go see a cool bird species is, you can check that out as well. And so those are all examples of citizen science. I hope this provided a little bit of context as to what some of the major benefits are, and even if there are challenges, the ways that those challenges can be overcome just through things like proper training, easy instruction, quality control checking, and hopefully it even inspired a little bit of interest in going out and checking out any of these programs that are maybe a little bit more local or that anybody can participate in. And after that, I can open it up to any questions that there may be. Let me see. I don't know that I have any questions. Okay, I don't see any. So thanks so much for joining. I hope this was helpful. If you have any questions after viewing this, please feel free to reach out to me. Like I said, I'm an educator here at Chehaw, so please feel free to reach out if you have any questions or interest, and I'd be happy to talk about it some more. And with that, thanks so much for joining, and I hope everybody has a good day.